What creates disappointment? What is the essence of disappointment? So when we're disappointed, we usually feel deprived of something. And we feel deprived of something and we don't get what we want from that circumstance or situation or outcome. We get and feel disappointed that we're in lack, right? We're back in lack mode. We're back in, I feel deprived and I don't feel whole again, right? You see, because disappointment is almost a judgment call saying, I needed that. I was supposed to have that. It was supposed to work out in the way I thought it was supposed to work out. It was supposed to go the way I intended for it to go, but it didn't. So I'm disappointed. That person didn't behave like I wanted him to behave, so I'm disappointed. My child is making different decisions than I thought they'd make in their lives, so I'm disappointed. We need to start being more objective about disappointment, because if we're looking at things from that lens, that sounds kind of arrogant. Or it sounds very self-defeatist at the same time, too, because it's like if certain things don't pan out the way you thought they would, that could potentially be in your favor. That could potentially be saving you a load of heartache. That could be potentially saving you from a long, drawn-out experience that would actually deter you from getting what you truly want in the long run. So instead of being disappointed that we're not getting what we want, or gosh, I didn't have to, or someone I love did not respond that I wanted to respond, well, everything has their own modality. And if your happiness is contingent on somebody else's responses to you or how the circumstances evolve, whether it be in your favor or not, you can't see through the benefit, the lesson through those things, then you will always be in a state of loss. You always feel like you're being in a state of deprivation, not getting what you want, relying on false premise of things, theories, ideologies to make you feel better so you don't feel disappointed. I see a lot of people rely on like religions and these, like I always call out these faux spiritual communities, because it gets them away from feeling disappointed. It puts them in this haze of false sense of hope. Right? And in a sense, like keeps them, codependent on those ideologies so they don't feel disappointed any longer. And that keeps them in a cycle of trepidation, keeps them in isolation. You see, because disappointment is just a choice. You can really snap out of disappointment and say, well, maybe this is working out for me, or maybe this is just the wrong timing. Let's gather myself together and see, what is the timing that I need right now? What are the things that I should be focusing on? What are the things I do need to bring into my life right now? Maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot. We can completely change the essence of disappointment and turn it into, my soul is navigating here. I'm not aware of how it's driving the show. I'm just a backseat driver, just like, what's going on here? Instead of being in tune to the soul that is driving the show and understanding the soul knows what's best for us. The soul will place things in our lives that we need and take things out of our lives that we don't need. That means both on the positive and negative end of the spectrum. The positive and the negative end of the spectrum, as we can see in the background here. So even if you weren't welcomed in that cheating boyfriend, you welcomed in that financial issue, you welcomed in these situations that were depriving of you, your soul knew to bring it in because it needs to wake you up to a realization about yourself that you need to expand out of so you stop feeling disappointed in your life, that you start driving the show. That's where you start celebrating things. Everything becomes a celebration, because if you recognize everything is happening for you, through you, but not to you, then you start recognizing the story here. You start making the understanding of why things are happening the way they're happening, why things are not happening the way they're happening. You understand that you're actually in control based on your perception of how you're experiencing your life. And you start celebrating that, things always do have a message behind it. You start seeing the message behind everything in your reality. That becomes a very celebratory experience. That's true growth. But understand, disappointment isn't some built-in feeling that you have. It's a choice. See, I used to be disappointed about a lot of things. I used to be disappointed about the collective energy. I used to be disappointed about how people respond and how people behave. That's a big challenge of mine, because I know I'm a very giving person, a very considerate person. Dealing with inconsiderate people would make me very reactive. Then I recognize, I'm not being considerate to myself because I'm overemphasizing other people's choices. That is really, I'm not being considerate of my own energy, allowing myself to just disconnect from what other people are doing. And so then I allow myself to be more objective in saying they have their own path, that everyone has their own story. We don't know their story. And then I just recognize that I'm not moved. I'm not affected by that any longer. And the freedom of knowing that there doesn't have to be parameters that make me feel a certain way or dictate how I feel feels very freeing. And then I know I can never be in pain. I can never be hurt. I can never be scared, nor can I ever be disappointed. Wouldn't that be nice if you guys can look at your life and say to yourselves, I'm living my life and I know I can never be disappointed ever in my life. I can never feel pain. I can never feel hurt. There'll be some growing pains, but you know you're in control of the circumstances. Isn't that freeing? Ask yourself this. What if you said to yourself, I will never feel disappointment for the rest of my life? How would that feel? How would you behave? Would you see things a little differently if you knew disappointment was just an illusion, that disappointment was just a choice of how you're trying to encode the lessons or the timing of certain things in your life? What would you do? How would you live life if you knew there would be no more disappointment in your life? How would you behave? Most of you guys would take that leap of faith. Most of you guys would go out there and talk to that person you might be looking at and want to flirt with. You might just take that chance. You're like, oh, I can't be disappointed, so what's the harm? Let's go do it. And if they say no, it's not the right person, moving on. You would go for that job interview. You would ask for that raise. You would take that leap of faith and go to the new home, the new location, so to speak. You take those leaps of faith because you wouldn't be so afraid of rejection and disappointment. You'd be like, that doesn't exist for me. And that's where things become in harmony. And that's where you can see through the physical challenges and what they really truly represent and what they mean. You see, because balance really is understanding there's a reason. There's always, and when we talk about learning curves and lessons and what is for you, not everything for you is positive. Sometimes there's the things that are for you that are negative. And like I always say, negative energy is just a separating, disconnecting energy, and positive energy is just a very expansive, a very inclusive, a building energy. Right? And so sometimes we need those things in our lives that are disconnecting. If you're in an abusive relationship, you got to disconnect from that. That's negative energy. But you need that. And if you're not getting a message, sometimes you need to bang your body up a little bit to understand that you're not taking care of yourself. There are things in your life that everything's happening for you and through you. But we got to get out of the mentality that everything's happening to us. To us. Be one of those individuals. Be the individual that understands that disappointment is only a choice. Disappointment is only an option that I'm selecting because I didn't get my way, because I did not see the bigger picture that it's actually happening for me.